Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Hello, my friends, and welcome, Elite Achievers. Here we go. This week, I've been thinking about compensation. You know, getting paid. I just wrapped up a big project at work at this small law firm that I was consulting with, and I did a bunch of interviewing and some hiring. Some of the positions I interviewed for include receptionist, an intake consultant, a paralegal, an associate attorney, and a business manager. I told you I did a lot of interviewing, and it was an interesting experience talking with all different types of people, young, not young, men, women, different education levels, different backgrounds, cultures, and I received a variety of responses to all of my questions. But there was one thing that they all had in common, and that was a desire to be fairly compensated for a day's work. And sometimes that definition of fair was different in the eyes of the employer than in the eyes of the potential employee. So it got me thinking about creating incentives to hire and retain key employees that are going to get the work done and still allow us to make a profit. And for that reason, today I have invited a compensation expert, Kevin Monaghan, onto the show. Kevin has an incredible background. He worked on NBC's The Office and Parks and Recreation. You've heard of those, right? He built an expat financial consulting business in China and founded Intuitive Compensation Group, where he uses his skills of working with business owners to retain key employees, develop buyout strategies, and navigate working with family business partners. You can see why I'm excited for this chat. Today, we're going to explore the common options business owners have to retain, inspire, and reward key employees and learn about potential strategies that are less common. Kevin, welcome to Modern Leadership. How are you?
Good, Jake. Thank you very much for having me.
Holy smokes, you've got a tremendous background, so many different things. Before we get into compensation, which is what I want to talk about this whole time, I'm a big fan of The Office. I love Michael Scott, Steve Carell. What was it like? What was your role working on NBC's The Office?
So I guess if you're going to be in compensation, you have to make people laugh to break the tension sometimes. So I had actually started in compensation and left to go pursue comedy because I was pretty young, and that show was taking off at the time. So I was a big fan of communication, studying it, practicing it, took a job cold calling so I could get those skills. 8 months later, cold calling, got a job as the production assistant on The Office and worked my way into the writer's assistant, production assistant in that field. So it was so much fun being on that show. It was the best job in the world, but if you couldn't become a writer, you weren't making enough to get by in Los Angeles for a very long period of time. So best job I had, best 3 years. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's very difficult to become a writer in Hollywood.
And I think sometimes you got to look at these experiences as like an internship, right? The compensation is not so much in the financial reward, but in the experience of seeing how things operate, being around people who are at the top of their game, who really lean in. I think some people think that being an actor or actress is just easy, that it comes natural, or that they get into character and go. But you've seen it at this high level where they're really working hard. And I think it's just a fascinating story. I actually think we could do a whole podcast episode just talking about this.
It was fascinating to me how many of them came out with degrees from Harvard, Yale, top Ivy League schools. It blew my mind that things like National Lampoons was Harvard's writing school. I didn't even know that until I got there.
And it's amazing that the hard work and the environment and being around that. So your internship for 3 years, then you did this financial consulting business in China, which couldn't be easy.
No, I had so much fun on working on that show, on those shows, that if I was going to leave some type of dream job and pursue something else, it had to be for something extraordinary. So I was interviewing with S&P 500 companies, looking around going, if I have to sit behind a desk all day compared to what I was just doing, I'm not going to adapt well. So I turned to looking overseas, and it was about 2007. Europe, you could sense the recession coming, But in Asia, they didn't have the same underlying fundamental issues. So there was a big opportunity out there. A firm heard I was looking internationally, flew me out there, and decided to give it a chance. And it was a very interesting experience. I think I benefited a lot from taking away all your comforts in life and just throwing you into a mix. And it was I have a lot of gray hairs from that experience. Let's put it that way.
And where were you located in China?
So I moved to Shanghai, China.
So a massive city with a very different cultural background and perspective, and working in expat financials. I mean, we think we have a lot of regulations in the financial industry here. In fact, as part of this episode, we have to play a disclaimer because of the regulations. But I would imagine that when you were in China, there was quite the regulations on what you were able to do.
Ironically, I was recruited out there and they said, because you worked in some type of compensation before, we have a problem overseas. And the problem is that the Chinese nationals are very regulated, but the expats aren't. And there's no such thing as like a 401k over here. So if there was an American executive who was working over in China, they were getting paid very well. All their expenses were covered. So they had all this free income. But there was no retirement plans over there. And the RMB or the currency over there wasn't freely traded. So you didn't want a pension in Chinese because the government was pretty new. There was a risk to it and you couldn't exchange it freely. So they needed some place to put the money, and they had a lot of issues because of regulation in the US of what they could do with it.
Another topic that I think we could spend an entire podcast on. But Kevin, you come to us as an expert in compensation. You heard in the intro, I just went through the process of hiring a number of different positions for this law firm I was doing some consulting with. It was a fascinating process, but I came out of it with one big dilemma, and that was, I want good people to come on the team, but I don't know if they're going to be good when they come on the team. And then the second thing is, the reason I was doing so much hiring is because we were losing good people. And so this compensation idea came into my mind, and I said, I got to sit down with someone who knows what they're talking about. And that's you.
And Jake, it's funny when I go out and I talk and any group of business owners I'm speaking with, I use a law firm as an example because that's where everybody knows a lawyer who just left a firm for more money to go to another firm, or who just spun off to start their own. So it's because it's so common that attorneys have trouble keeping good people. I use them as an example, and it relates instantly to everybody. So interesting timing on you working with a law firm.
Yeah, so let's start with the hiring process. So we're looking at these new individuals coming in, and frankly, right now, in our current economic environment, we've got unemployment as some of the lowest that we've ever seen it. So competition for good talent is very high. And so we got to weed through the not great talent to try to get to the good talent. And then once we do, how do we bring them on board without breaking the bank and find out if they really are as good as they, came on their resume?
Right. So a lot of what you just described is a give and take between somebody looking to hire, see if they're a good fit. No business owner wants to overpay somebody right away. And yet at the same time, no business owner wants to put all this time, energy, and effort into training for somebody only to have them leave. So it's a delicate balance of what to do. You described a wide range of positions. So let me see if I can kind of break down what we see out there as far as compensation and what options or tools a business owner has. So a law firm, their biggest problem is you bring somebody of talent into the firm. They're training under you. Your firm is providing the marketing budgets, generating the leads. A lot of the clients start only knowing this person that you just brought into the firm, and they have the relationship with them. So as time goes on and this attorney is sitting at his desk and he's going, boy, I'm doing a lot of business. If I ran my own company, 100% of the revenue would be mine to deal with, instead of having to write a check to the business owner, or they're paying me and I know that I'm earning more than my keep. So how do you balance that becomes, the issue. So any business owner out there is pretty much looking at a standard of kind of 6 different options when they go through the process of how do I pay the key people at my firm. And you're going to have some different roles. Some are going to be the high performers. Some are just going to be, as long as somebody can stay in that position and I don't have to retrain, they're not haymakers, but they're good, solid people. I just want to convince them to stay here and have some clarity around that. So let's look at kind of the 6, what I call pillars of compensation. The first one is to pay people. So no business owner wants to increase their fixed expenses, and paying somebody more. Even if you're paying somebody more, I always say there's another business owner out there in more pain than you that's willing to throw a higher salary at somebody to get them away from your firm, whether it's fundamentally sound or not. So even if you pay somebody more, somebody else could still come in. And we've seen people leave for $20,000 more a year, even in high-end paying jobs, even for far less substantial firms.
And this, I think, is kind of historically, this is where we've competed as companies, where, bank across the street says, hey, I'll bring one of your employees on over here for a little bit more. And we've competed on just this first pillar, this compensation, straight compensation.
Yep. And that can include bonuses, commissions. And, the problem with putting out a big bonus is it becomes expected quick. It basically turns into pay. And then if you don't pay it out because you had a bad year, all of a sudden your key person's going, well, I didn't get a bonus this year. That's a sign that the firm's not doing well. I might as well just go elsewhere. And now, in addition to having a bad year, you're losing the key person that you want to keep there going forward. So it's no matter how you break down pay, compensation, just salary, bonus, or commissions, somebody's always willing to throw more at them.
Yeah, it's easy to move forward. It's impossible to move backwards. And a quick story with this, as you were talking about it, it just came right to my mind that one year we had a great year and we gave everybody a $500 Christmas bonus, season bonus at the end of the year. And it wasn't that much. I mean, in perspective of how much they were making, it wasn't that much money, but it became expected. The very next year, we had a normal year, not a great year, but a normal year, and we weren't able to give the same bonus. And everybody thought that the train, that the boat was sinking.
Right. Yep. It's funny what the expectations are when you start doing bonuses. So then we take a look, and in law firms, they typically jump to one of two places next, either some type of profit sharing or equity. So let's start with equity. Equity, in theory, the business owners like because it doesn't really cost them much today, and they think it ties them into it. So when you give away equity of your firm, it doesn't really cost you much up front. You may structure it where they're buying in or using the profits to buy in or something like that, but usually your key employee doesn't have the money to buy in. You're giving him 2% per year for 4 years or 5 years, and maybe he's vesting, maybe not. But by the end of it, it's still a minority stake in a company. And what we realize is that while it feels good at first for the employee, it very quickly turns into, I only have 15% of this company. I can't control it. I wanted to see the books. I was told no. I wanted to make some changes. I don't have the voting rights to do so. I don't really control anything. And then it becomes expensive. So we've had law firms where you've got somebody with their name on the building and 40% of the law firm leave and start their own firm. And this would drive me nuts if I was a business owner. Can you imagine owning 100% of your firm? You bring somebody in, train them up for 3 to 5 years. They get all their clients, all their centers of influence while you're paying them under your marketing budget. And then they spin off. And now not only do they own 100% of their own firm, but they own 40% of yours. That would drive me nuts as a business owner. So equity is real easy to give away up front, but it's very difficult to get back on the back end. And then if you're trying to build up your firm to sell, now this person's not there. And if you sell your firm, they're going to benefit for no additional work into it. So we then look over to profit sharing. And I think that this is one that has the best intentions and some of the worst consequences.
And I think this is very common, Kevin. We talk about law firms, and not all the listeners to this podcast are law firms, but I think this is a very common for some of these service-based industries like law firms to offer a little bit of profit sharing to incentivize some of their rainmakers to go out and bring more rain.
Yep, exactly. And so what I say is best intentions is for a business owner, it sounds great. You literally say, well, if I had more money, I would pay my employees more and share it with them. So people put together profit sharing plans. And then what winds up happening, and here's why I say the best intentions, is you wind up getting a scenario where you as a business owner may have to make decisions that are business decisions that are now judged by the people who depend on the profit sharing. So if you are a law firm and you are going to things are going good and you're going to expand and you need to invest money to expand, your key employees may be performing, but now they look and they go, well, my profit sharing is lower because you invested in a new office and that has nothing to do with me, but I should have gotten more money. And now it becomes a point of disgruntledness. For example, when I was in China, the firm that I worked for, I had a profit sharing in place. They were expanding. We were killing it. We became the number one performing company for what we did, but they were expanding in Dubai and London, and it never panned out for us. And I'm looking at them going, this isn't working or this isn't functioning, and it's not fair.
Well, can I ask you about that a little bit, Kevin? Because, me being business background, I have an MBA. I understand that if I take some of that profit and invest it in Dubai and London, that down the road, there's going to be more for me to profit share. Now, as a 40%, as a profit sharer, I may only get a certain portion of that. But let me ask you, was your kind of unhappiness with that because you saw your position as short term? You said, I'm not going to be around with this company long enough to benefit in the growth in Dubai and London, because the growth throughout the company should affect your profit sharing, shouldn't it?
You would think so. But if you're a business owner, you're also thinking, why am I giving profit sharing of a different location, different personnel, different client base, maybe even a different LLC to somebody else?
I see. Yes.
So your motivation, it sounds good to say before you do it, but afterwards, when you do the math, you're going, I'm allocating rewards to somebody who's not participating in the risk or the workload of these other locations, other LLCs, other businesses.
Absolutely.
So it's, it can become, that was my opinion of it, was how does this play out for me? Because I'm not a part of it. If I were them, I wouldn't want to share it with me, but I would tell them. I would tell my employees, don't worry, it'll be better. There'll be more to exactly what you just described is the business owner mindset. So one of the key things that I think differentiates us for what we do is that I've been the key employee. I had a profit sharing plan where I went through all the disgruntledness of watching the boss spend money on a new Mercedes. And all of a sudden I go, wait a minute, if he had bought a more reasonably priced car, I would have more profit sharing. And so that's why I say the best intentions is you want to, as a business owner, you may have to make tough decisions and you have to act like a business owner, but all of a sudden your profit sharing could become the reason your key employee is now judging you and becoming disgruntled. So it creates that tension there. And that's why I say the profit sharing is, the road to success is paved with, or the road to failure is paved with the best intentions.
Best intentions.
Yep. So it's that's what it winds up becoming. There are scenarios, and again, any one of these I've seen can work or not. So we're just kind of discussing the positives and negatives of each one.
Well, and in different industries and different company cultures, each would work. I mean, I can see a company where the owner is really saying, hey, look, we're going to share the profit in Dubai and London. I can see that being an incentive for a certain employee in a certain company and culture and so on and so forth. But I can also see that all of these can work, best intentions can work against you in another circumstance and situation. That's why you have 6 pillars.
Right, exactly. So to round out the other ones, so we've covered pay, equity, and some profit sharing. I usually talk about revenue sharing as well, but in profit sharing, I don't see too many revenue sharing plans. Most business owners, I know it's been a long time since we've had a down economy, but when it comes, it is not fun to owe additional money when you have no profits. So I don't see too much revenue sharing out there. So I usually don't elaborate on it too much because most business owners wouldn't put themselves in that. That's a risk for a business owner to put themselves in.
Yeah. And for any listeners who are unsure of what the difference between a profit sharing plan and a revenue sharing plan, well, it's whether you're taking the top line before expenses or the bottom line after expenses is the difference.
Right. And then what we have next, the next pillar is benefits. Benefits are they're unique. They're unique to culture. So bring your dog to work. That might be really important to some people, especially on the maybe not the high performing people. I've never seen a super high performer bring their care a lot about bringing their dog to work because they're usually busy people. To some, but to each their own. You never know. But I haven't heard people say, boy, this new company is going to offer me 4% match instead of 3% match in my 401k. I'm out of here. All benefits, you either have them or you don't. And when we see people leaving, case in point, my sister left one company. She went to a new company and they didn't have disability. She said, I priced out disability. This is what it would cost. Would you consider paying me that much more? They said, sure, no problem. So it's not usually something that is a big game changer for people. Is just either the standard benefits. Healthcare, that is a decision. You either have it or you don't have it, and it comes down to a cost, and you just tell your new employer, this is what it would cost me to buy healthcare. You don't have it. That's what I need to come. So I don't see benefits keeping too many people.
What about when we look at like millennials and we look at some of these Silicon Valley companies like a Google and a Facebook? I went and took a tour of the Facebook campus, and they have a little ice cream shop. And I'm not talking about, go over and get your own free self-serve ice cream. This is like a full-on go and pick toppings and big bowls of ice cream and so on and so forth. How about benefits in cultural benefits in regard to like some of these millennials and Silicon Valley companies?
Yeah, so there's some cool trendiness. My brother lives out in San Francisco, and he was at an energy company that had free food, and he was at the same time he was a rower, so he would burn a lot of calories throughout the day. He loved it, but at the same time, as he grew older, and he's now approaching 33, 34, food only has so much benefit to staying there. But at a time when he was young, I tell you what, it was pretty important and pretty cool perk to him. But as he's getting older and moving more towards family benefit, you start pricing out how much it's going to cost to feed kids, and you're not going to bring your kids to work every day with you. So sometimes it makes a great impact at the right time, at the right place, but we don't see people staying with firms because there's an ice cream bar for a long time.
Well, and I think it might be kind of tied into our own self-esteem and our own self-worth, because if I'm working for, let's just use Facebook, and I can go back and tell my friends, hey, my company has free massages and it has bicycles that I can pick up and they do dry cleaning for me. It's not the dry cleaning that I'm impressed by, because frankly, at 25 years old, I don't think I ever dry cleaned a single outfit. But it's the fact that I can tell my friends, hey, my company has this. And I think as we grow into larger positions of more responsibility, and when we're going and talking to our friends, free dry cleaning just doesn't have the same effect on our self-worth, self-esteem as it did maybe when we were younger.
Yeah, I would say this, it adds to the excitement level around a recruitment. So when you can take somebody on an office tour and you can go past, hey, here's your daycare, here's your this, here's your that, that's really cool. But again, those are much more short-term victories than I think long-term.
Okay. Now, what's our sixth pillar?
We jumped over 5. This is where we kind of see, this is where I've seen the 5th pillar pop up called phantom stock. And I don't know if you run into this a lot, Jake. So the 5th pillar that's popped up is called phantom stock. This is a solution to giving away equity. So we see it done in 2 forms. The first form is most common probably with private equity firms. It's phantom stock. Hey, if you help me build this company to sell in 5 years, we will give you, as if you owned, let's say it can be a handful of employees, it can be one employee. We will give you, as if you own 10% of the company, that sale price. So if you help us take this company from a $10 million valuation today to a $100 million valuation in 5 years, you will get as if you own 5% on the sale of the stock. So you can actually incentivize people for the sale of the company. The positive side to that is it's a pretty good solution to giving away equity, where you have all the problems where what happens if you give him the equity and then he leaves the company. So phantom stock is cool on the build to sale model because it really incentivizes everybody to work hard to help build for the sale. My argument on this new way of compensation is, if I'm buying a company and I'm going to come in and pay $100 million for this company, and the guy that I want running it just got a $5 million check, how motivated is he going to be to work hard? I mean, you just gave him the finish line, and I'm supposed to start now, and now I got to worry about him being off. So I think that it in compared to other types of compensation model ruins the fun a little bit, because I don't want to pay somebody else's lottery ticket. I want to come in and I want this business I want to work together. I don't want this guy to get rich and have to be around for 12 months and then that's it.
And I think this is a fascinating perspective that you're looking at, which didn't cross my mind as you were talking about. What crossed my mind is, as a small business owner, I'm already planning to sell my company. And I think when you talk about law firms, I don't know very many lawyers that are starting their law firm to sell in 5 years. I think in Silicon Valley and technology, there's more of this, hey, let's build it up and sell it type of, but as we go across America and we look at small business owners and entrepreneurs that are out there, how many of them are starting with the plan of, hey, let's build this up and sell it?
Right. So certain industries will look to do it. Where you get California, I think everybody wants to build a company and sell it in 5 years and get rich. Law firms, they'll tell you can't sell this. You can't sell a law firm. You're never going to get full premium. So phantom stock wouldn't work for the law firm. That pillar is usually not on the build to sell model. Where you see the law firm start to do is the phantom equity but it's basically just a profit sharing plan with a new cool trendy name. It's the same, new pig with the same lipstick, or whatever, however that phrase goes. So you get hey, it's as if you own 10% of the company. We had $100,000 profit, and you would get $10,000 because you own phantom 10% of the shares, so 10% of the distributions would be yours, and that's how they model it. So I walk into a lot of dental offices. I walk into a lot of law firms where we're using Excel sheets to track this stuff. It becomes fun to track, and we send the Excel spreadsheet to the CPA and every year, and that's how we track it. CPA likes it because they love numbers. But at the same time, I always say it's just a profit sharing plan, and you do two things with that. One is you have the same problems we discussed before with that pillar. The second problem, though, once you give somebody a profit sharing plan, as soon as they know how to benefit the numbers to give themselves the most benefit, they start doing that. So if there's one portion of business that's more important or more profitable than another, they're going to focus on that, which in theory is probably good, but it may have been the other work that they were doing before led to the generation of leads that led to that profit, and nobody wants to focus on that anymore because it doesn't have the immediate profit. So you get people who are just thinking short term, how do I maximize the profit? And they're not doing the upfront work anymore. So again, it falls into the same conditions of profit sharing plan and the same troubles we mentioned before. So we've done a good job of outlining kind of what a small business owner looks at. And then where we come in, or our specialty comes in, is what I call the sixth pillar, comes into play with things like 162 leverage bonus, split dollar plans. These would be executive bonus, double bonus, restricted bonus. These are just tax laws that are in the IRS books, and that you can select an employee or two, a key employee, and just give them direct benefits without having to give everybody else the benefit. So some rules, like a 401k match, if you give it to one person, you have to give everybody the opportunity to do it. So these are tax codes that we work with and we help business owners understand. You can do these with a lot of different asset classes. You can do it with cash, you can put it in the markets, you can put it into real estate, you can put it into other businesses. We make the argument, though, that you do not want your compensation plan to have those types of risks. You want your compensation plan to be very predictable. And therefore, when we look at all the different types of asset classes to use, we recommend that you take a look at the most common is cash value insurance. And it's a boring old tool, but when you use certain types that are designed for a business, it gives people predictability, protection. And when I say that, it usually triggers the mind to think, how in the world would you use that as a compensation plan?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Cash bonus insurance is what you called it?
Cash value insurance.
Value. Okay, let's talk about it a little bit. Not boring, but fun.
Okay, so there's different types of insurance, but we're using ones where there's guarantees around the cash value and guarantees around the things like the benefits, the death benefit. Let me give a high-level national example here. The University of Michigan recruited and hired Jim Harbaugh from the San Francisco 49ers. And in college, this was a risk for both parties. think of the University of Michigan like a business. They found somebody with a highly sought after skill, which was taking a team that was underperforming and turning them into a playoff contender. And so they said, we need Jim Harbaugh to come here. But in college football, you need some recruitment cycles to play through to really excel the business. So we need a little bit of clarity on longevity. Now, no business owner wants to overpay somebody in salary because it's a fixed cost every year. So what they did was they said, hey, Jim, we will look to make you the highest compensated coach, but we want to create a win-win scenario for both of us. So what they did was they said, and again, you can structure this in a lot of different ways, but what they did was they said, we're going to pay you $5 million in salary. Now, that didn't make him the highest paid coach at the time. But what they then said was, we're going to put $4 million into one of these types of vehicles. A split dollar was, let's assume in this scenario, where we're going to put it in as part of your compensation. So you had, in the first 2 years, a total of $9 million each year. Now, what they did was they said, let's take the worst case scenario. Let's say Jim didn't like it and he wanted to leave. If he wanted to leave, all of a sudden, he got paid 2 annual salaries of $5 million and $5 million, and the university put $4 million and $4 million into this package. If Jim Harbaugh left the University of Michigan to go coach the
Ohio, oh no,
yeah, the Cleveland Browns, wherever he goes, Ohio State, right? Then the University of Michigan would be able to keep the cash value. So Jim is effectively walking away from $8 million of potential future bonus, whatever the cash value would be for him in that year. So you have this scenario where imagine how many business owners would pay their key employees more if they knew that if they left, there was some type of recourse to get it back.
When would Jim get the pay? I mean, was there a trigger?
So typically there wasn't. The University of Michigan had to disclose approximately how it worked, but how they exactly structured it is speculated. But something like this, and you could structure these things very differently. Hey, Jim, if you work here for 10 years, this package is yours. So this is referred to as maybe like a stay bonus or some type of maybe it might have been like a restricted bonus where it's you have to serve here for X amount of years, and then we move it from us to you, so you would get it. But now you both have clarity. Jim knows that if he stays there for 10 years, he has a very predictable amount of cash value that will be there. He knows if he leaves, he's walking away from it, and the university gets it back. What you do in this scenario is you put numbers between the people. You don't put emotions. You don't put anything else. You put numbers between the two. So if Jim wants to leave, he knows exactly how much he's walking away from, and the University of Michigan knows exactly how much they're getting back. Now, we've talked about some of the downsides in the stay, but let's talk about some of the performance bonuses here. What you can do when you structure these is say, Jim, we want to entice you to perform. Let's say it's a litigation lawyer or, some other high-performing sales role. Jim, if you win one bowl game, we will release the loan to you or move it from the university's books into your name, or we will forgive any collateral that we have. So you can structure these a lot of ways. Now, when you do things like, let's say, forgive any collateral, you could create a taxable event for him. So you can say, hey, Jim, over this 10 years, if you win 2 major 5 bowl games, we will also bonus you the taxes out. And our role is to help people structure these because we work with their attorneys and their CPAs to make and define the rules of what does this look like? And so you can create a scenario where Jim Harbaugh has been there how many years now? 6, 7? But he's not going anywhere until that bonus kicks out. And at the same time, you also have incentives where if he doesn't perform, there may be you can structure it where there's rules where you can get some back. So you have this constant relationship of creating a win-win where your employee always has 1 or 2 carrots over his head, and you've got some protections on the back end if they leave or if they don't perform.
And it sounds a little bit complex, and that's why you've been able to build a business around this, is because this can work in so many different industries and so many different companies. It sounds complex, but when you structure it right, when you know what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to measure with your employee, well, then you just put it into place and then it operates. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is not spending any time, well, very little time thinking about his bonus. He knows what's going to happen. He knows what he needs to do to get to it. Maybe we don't know what he needs to do, but he sure does. And he's working towards that.
Correct. And the other reason you use these as structures is, let's say that, especially if you're in a small business, let's say that you structure something with a key employee for, let's say you've got an attorney and he's profitable at $250,000 a year after expenses, salaries, etc. So he knows his worth. You kind of know your worth. You'd be willing to, as long as you could keep that $250 a year coming in as a business owner, what would you be willing to commit to him to get clarity around him being there, continuing to bring in that type of revenue? So the answer is different for everybody.
Different profit margins in different businesses, but yeah.
Right. So our role is to come in, listen to what's important to the business owner. And then the hardest part is then we go and here's the key part is we listen to what's important to the employee. Because if you can align a compensation package that's important to what the employee wants, boy, is he going to come in every day and give you his all to get there.
Yeah, take the stairs two at a time, come at the balls of their feet.
Right. And, you get people who want their student debt taken care of. You get people who want, hey, a lot of times we find out that they want to start their own business in 10 years. Well, what if there was a way to kind of secure that if you guys work together towards your goals, that you could both be happy with that because the math made sense?
And I think this really looks at, the underlying thing that when you just said that, what the light bulb that struck in my head is this is really understanding and caring about your employees and understanding what they want and then working together towards that. And, understanding that your employees may leave. In fact, if you look at the statistics, they are going to leave. But how can you structure this in a way that you get a win-win out of it, that even though them leaving is not necessarily a win in the keeping them book, it's a win in that you got the most value out of them while they were there. You trained them, and now they're a referral source or a potential business partner moving into the future.
Yep, and it depends. When we go into companies, sometimes we look at it and you get things all over the board. We get some people saying, you know what? It's not like I can go to my key employee and say, are you thinking of leaving me? So the fact that we have something in place that I now know gives us a window of, and maybe our conversations led to them getting 7 years together versus maybe 3 to 4, that clarity between them and the commitments between them to create a win-win. You work hard for me for 7 years, I'll give you this, and there's extra bonuses that could be structured at the end. They're going to work hard during that time. And as a business owner, you've got clarity around that aspect of it.
And if you've got a good employee, getting 7 years instead of 4 is huge. When you're doubling the amount of time that they're there, having the amount of impact on training and teaching a new person and the hiring process, this is huge.
Yep, exactly. So, the cool things about this as well is what if, and I'm going to go back to what I was talking about before. What if you're a business owner and you want to position your business to sell, and you have one of these types of things in place? We talked about phantom stock aligning for the sale before, but me as a buyer, I really don't get excited about it because I go, all my top management is going to win the lottery on my leverage. What I've got to replace all the top management in the next year or two. That's not very assuring. Can you imagine now if I'm a buyer and you told me, hey, I have this compensation structure in place where we've been doing this and contributing this for 5 years. There is, let me make up numbers here, $500,000 of cash value in a vehicle designed for him. We're putting into it for another 5 years, but I control half of the cash value via collateral. Now, if I'm a buyer, I'm coming into a scenario where if this key manager doesn't perform for me, because it's scary buying a company. You don't know what you're actually going to get. They're only going to tell you about they're going to make this sound like you're buying the best company in the world. But if you get in there, you've now got a vehicle where if it doesn't work out with that key employee or he's not performing or something happens and you could take some money back, you've got some extra insurance around your purchase. So buyers would be drooling at the opportunity to have something like this where the key employee has a lot of motivation to work with the new management or the new owner to continue what they're doing going forward so that this person releases the collateral to them.
Kevin, this is a fascinating conversation. I think could go on for hours and hours, although I do believe some of our listeners need to get into work and help compensate some of their employees. So we're going to have to cut this off right now. But before we let you go, I want to jump into a section that we love to close each and every podcast with, and that is learning from leaders. A couple of questions to learn a little bit more about what you're reading and operating in your life. Are you ready?
Got it. Ready.
All right. How about the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
E-Myth.
Which is absolutely terrific. This is the Michael Gerber, wonderful book that will help any business owner. How about your leadership superpower?
Communication awareness.
Which I think is so valuable. Please share a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra with us.
Run your business as if you are going to sell it.
You know, that's an interesting one, and I want to ask you why that's your mantra.
Because I think it puts business owners in a better position, because then that you can sell it if you want, but you also, if you're running it and thinking about it, like if somebody wanted to buy this business from me, you would pretty much have to make decisions as if you were going to remove yourself from the company. So it forces you as a business owner to make tougher decisions to get yourself out of the day-to-day grind to have a sellable business versus like the lawyers, somebody who nobody's going to buy my business for prices because it's me.
This is a light bulb moment for me, Kevin, because I think you're absolutely right. If you run your business with the option to sell it in the future, you have a choice. If you run your business on the alternate path, you don't have a choice. You remove the choice. And so this is I love that mantra that you shared there. Final question for us then is the book that you most often gift to friends or colleagues.
A Founder's Dilemma.
Tell us about that one a little bit.
So it says, how do you balance being an owner versus an investor versus how do you compensate key employees? It talks about all the struggles that people will go through in order to try to maximize their value, their compensation for being an investor, an owner, or a manager.
It's very interesting. You as the founder of your company, me as the founder of my business, I think that this really resonates, and I'm very interested to pick up a copy and kind of dive into that mindset myself. Kevin, before we let you go, any last bit of advice? How can we find out more about you and what you do and connect with you?
Sure. So if you go to intuitivecompensation.com, we've got some example scenarios of the types of scenarios we help business owners work through. We cannot, industry restriction, and you probably have to play a disclaimer right after this, is that we cannot use testimonials. So we put some examples up there through Storyboard in quick video. That would be the best place to go for your next steps.
Perfect. And we'll link that up on the show notes. And you're absolutely right. Following a little jingle after our conversation, there will be a little message disclaimer. Kevin, thank you for spending some time with us today. This is a fascinating conversation. One of my favorite topics to talk about, and I learned a lot. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Jake. Enjoyed it.
The views expressed are those of Kevin Monaghan. The information provided is not intended and should not be construed as specific tax or legal advice. Neither Intuitive Compensation Group nor Kevin Monaghan provides tax or legal advice. You should seek advice from your own tax or legal professional for such guidance. Kevin Monaghan is an agent of Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company, Mass Mutual, Springfield, Massachusetts. Intuitive Compensation Group is not a subsidiary or affiliate of Mass Mutual.
Well, that was a fun episode for me. You know, it was on my mind, this topic of compensation and how to do it in a way that we can get the most out of our employees and how we can really propel our businesses moving forward. I know a lot of you listening are business owners or you're in charge of compensation for your company, and it's important to know how we can keep good people on our teams. It's important to know that there are options out there. We don't just have to compete on pure pay, pure compensation, but we can structure it in a way where we can have a win-win. And just a quick recap of the 6 pillars of compensation that we talked about. There's pay compensation. There was equity. We talked about profit sharing and revenue sharing. We talked about benefits and perks. We talked about this phantom stock, and then we concluded by talking about kind of this alternate fashion that's coming out now. That's this 162 leverage bonus or split dollar plans or cash value insurance, all unique ways to make sure we keep those that we want to keep and compensate those who are really performing for us and not find loopholes for them to skirt performance. Of course, everything that we talked about on this episode of the podcast can be found over on jakeacarlson.com/ML68 for episode 68. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life. Stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.